Hi, everyone. John Michael Coppola here, and welcome to the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast, where we chat with the actors, directors, choreographers, designers, producers, music directors, lyricists, playwrights, and all the artists who make the Chicago area theaters come alive. We're so excited to have you here with us today. But before we get started, we just want to remind you to please like, subscribe to, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues who you think would appreciate the conversations we're having. We'd be so grateful for your support in this way so we can continue to bring these stories for years to come. Thanks again for being here, and now, curtain up on today's episode. Today's guest gracefully balances multiple careers as an actress, college professor, and casting director. Originally from San Francisco, she received her BFA at Boston Conservatory. After working for many years as a performer, she was then recruited by renowned casting director Jay Binder to join his office as his assistant and fellow casting director. She eventually left New York to return to San Diego to get her MFA at San Diego State University, and from there began her teaching journey. A professor since 2012, she moved to Chicago in 2019 to begin her career at North Central College in Naperville, where she was tenured in 2025. As an actress, she has been seen at Drury Lane, Metropolis, Music Theater Works, and is also now working here in town as a freelance casting assistant. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Mitzi Smith. Now let's go to the top of the show. Hi, Mitzi. How are you?
Good. So good to see you.
You as well. Thanks so much for joining me here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm honored.
So listen, we always ask the same question to all of our guests at the very top of each podcast, and that is to please tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up, about your background, your training, but most importantly, what your first theater experience was. So I hand it over to you.
Well, I am from San Francisco, so I'm not from Chicago originally. Knew at a really early age that I wanted to do theater. I really kind of grew up on the PBS airing of Into the Woods, and saw my first professional production at a very young age. I was 6, and my cousin was starring in a production of Gypsy, and I was just moved beyond belief. Like, it was the most captivating experience. And that really propelled me. And then, like, through high school, I went to a performing arts school and, went to school for musical theater in college. And I just felt this drive really consistently. Like, I needed to make theater my life. Went to the Boston Conservatory, moved to New York, had a lot of great experiences there. And then I moved back to California for graduate school to get my master's because I was very interested in teaching in higher ed. And that is what actually ended up landing me in Chicago.
Oh.
Is a professor opportunity. But yeah, I would say just I feel very lucky that I knew so young and I never doubted that this is what I wanted to do. So my path has just kind of unfolded and I've found myself in different spaces with new people. So I'm glad to be a Chicago theater person.
That's amazing. So now, when you saw Gypsy, you say your cousin starred in Gypsy. What role did they play?
She was Gypsy Rose Lee. And my cousin Valerie Perry, she is hands down my number one inspiration. And she has made her entire living as a professional actor.
Wonderful.
And she actually starred in the Chicago production of Evita right after the show opened in New York and won the Tonys and worked with Hal Prince. And so she was Gypsy Rose Lee in that production. And I've seen her in many, many, many shows. I will travel anywhere to see her. And it was amazing to me that somebody I knew was somebody different on stage.
Uh-huh.
And she's so immensely talented. And, throughout high school, we would go see her in productions. And even now, she's still doing theater. She's still a professional actor. And the great thing now is I was starting to play some of the roles she's played.
Great.
Every time, like, I get cast in something, I call her immediately. And I'm like, oh my God, Val.
Now, are you the only one in your family besides your cousin that's in the arts?
So Valerie has twin boys that are very musical. But I would say, yes, we're the only 2 performers, but we certainly come from a family with a tremendous amount of, musicians, people that play a lot of instruments. My parents love the arts. Um, so I would say as a family, like, we're very big appreciators of theater.
Gotcha. You mentioned that she was a very influential person in your life. Out of all the experiences from Boston Conservatory and your master's program, any other teachers that you could attribute to your path forward?
My voice teacher at the Boston Conservatory, Mary Saunders, I was able to study with her all 4 years, and she was so kind and so supportive and so loving, and, in that time in BFA programs, the more competitive, the better,
Yeah.
right? And so the training was really rigorous and certainly very intensive for 18 to 22-year-olds,
Hmm.
and Mary was like the constant, empathetic, warm, um, really supportive, grounding space. Um, and then another instructor I had, her name is Kathy Rand. At the time, she was very intimidating to me. I mean, she was so precise, her expectations were so high that I never felt like, I was gonna be able to please her.
Mm.
And after the fact, after graduating, I've contacted her many times, but actually when I got my first position teaching in higher ed, I contacted her and I said, "Now I get it. Now I'm so grateful for what you expected of us."
Yeah.
Um, and her level of care and expertise, I didn't get it then,
Uh-huh.
and she too had such a illustrious and, um, incredible career, but she was just as dedicated to her students, and so now we write back and forth to each other, which is really nice, and I'm I feel so glad that I'm still able, like, to stay in touch,
Uh,
with both of them.
I always like to hear the stories about the teachers who were encouraging and kind because you hear the other stories of teachers who were toxic and who pit students against one another. And that just doesn't make for a pleasant experience for the students. I don't know how the teacher feels that that can be pleasant for them. I'm always grateful to hear that the other life does exist in the university setting as well.
100%.
Yeah.
There are wonderful professors out there.
I'm curious about something. To be frank, I worked on a production several years, a couple summers ago, and there were a lot of kids that were either still in their uh, university setting doing the theater track, and some kids that just graduated.
Mhm,
And I was sort of surprised, and so I wanted to get your point of view on this. I was sort of surprised that there seemed to be a lack of doing the work. Now, this was in a professional summer stock theater that's been around for decades,
mhm,
very high quality. They bring in equity artists, they bring in, SDC directors, choreographers. And when these kids were not on the deck doing what they were to be doing and they were off, they weren't working on their material. We had kids who were paraphrasing, they didn't know their music, they kind of didn't know their choreography. They eventually, like by tech, were figuring it out. And it wasn't hard choreography.
mhm,
Um, and in conversations with some other educators, some felt, well, these are kids, they were the COVID generation and
mhm.
they need a little bit more grace. They need to be given a little bit more grace. And I'm all for grace, but I also feel like you still kind of have to do the work when you're being paid to do the work.
Yeah.
So what is your philosophy on these kids that are coming out of these settings, but they get into the real world and they have the chops, but they don't have the sort of, I don't want to say emotional intelligence, but sort of like they don't seem to grasp that they have to be professional or they have to actually do work when they're not in the spotlight. I just want to hear your point of view and maybe your teaching philosophy as well.
So, I think, my initial reaction is viewing it from a point of equity, not actors' equity, but, like,
Sure.
the meaning of equity,
Yeah.
and, you know, I think a lot of professional theater and professional theater makers have a very high expectation, which we should. We wanna make phenomenal art.
Hmm.
But these students, it is actually a really big leap from the college world to the professional. It's not seamless for everyone.
Okay.
And I think we need to program in more mentoring. I think we need
Mm,
to lead with kindness and help these young professionals develop because the shame-based approach is not coming from a place of equity. It's
sure.
not looking at, what was available for this student? What were they informed about? How were they trained?
Hmm.
I think especially like a lot of young people start as understudies and swings. What kind of training did they receive in their programs? And I think they deserve a little bit of space to develop. And it's very hard when you're approaching it as the professional and theater is a point of commercialism, right? And like we have to put together a great package and we want good reviews and we want to sell tickets.
Sure, sure.
Um, but I think that directors, choreographers, casting, I think there needs to be some built-in mentorship for them as well, and maybe it's somebody in the cast, like we have
Mm.
deputies.
Hmm.
Um, I did a show this past summer with new graduates, and some of them did not necessarily know the role of a deputy, and
Huh.
that's okay because they didn't have that experience in the collegiate setting.
Sure, sure.
So, I hear you, right? And I really try to instill in my students to be performing at the best possible version of themselves.
Hmm.
But I mean, I felt prepared leaving college, but I too, like, you know, made some young mistakes that the older actors or, one story I could think of in particular about trying to negotiate my contract after I had signed it.
Uh-huh.
I was 22 and the producer was like, "That's not how that works." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah,
So yes, I want these students to be performing at their ability,
yeah,
but I also it's so profoundly important to me as an educator and just like a human in this industry
yeah,
that we're helping them learn that
yeah.
and not perpetuating like, "You don't know that,"
No,
you know?
I agree, and, I think given the setting that it was a summer stock setting, and you have such a finite amount of time to get a show up and running,
Yeah.
it's like sadly, there's no room for that type of mentorship or grooming. Sorry, I hate to use that word because it's can have a negative connotation, but, for that particular setting. Now, if you're doing a brand new work and you've got a month or you're on Broadway, you've got all that, great. Or like you're doing a regional theater show, even that is kind of pushing it, but they have a little more room, and they're also not doing double duty, right? They're not rehearsing a show during the day while doing a show at night. Um, so it's an interesting concept, and I think one that needs a little bit more conversation. Maybe to have a company or a few
Yeah,
company mentors to help
I
any
agree.
any younger artists in the company. That's fantastic. What a great idea. Now you mentioned casting, and I want to have a little conversation about how you found your way doing that because that's a completely, I would say, different world. Obviously, it's the same world, but you have to kind of jump over the table to get there. And I want to know how that transition and that journey was for you.
It's a really, like, kinda crazy story. My best friend, Nick, we went to college together, and, Nick and I were really close, still are, because he was so motivated, and I felt so motivated, and when we first moved to New York, he was working on Broadway a lot, and we were just out to dinner with friends, friends that he knew from shows,
Yeah,
and we happened to be at dinner with a friend of a friend who worked for Binder Casting in New York,
yeah,
and she was saying that they were struggling at the moment, really needing, like, kinda some extra hands to help, facilitate some auditions, and, um, my friend Nick and his friend Micah were like, "Well, what about Mitzi?" And I was just at the table, and I was like, "Yeah. What about me? Sure, that sounds." And she's like, "Really? Like, you'd be interested in doing this?" And I was like, "Yes."
wow,
And very shortly after that dinner, she contacted me and she's like, "Okay, show up to Ripley Greer this time, this day, this studio, and, like, I'll fill you in." I can't remember what that first call was for, but it was, like, getting into the final callbacks for something, and she was like, "Listen, there's a lot of really important people in the room. You need to be quick, you need to follow my instructions, like, this is what I need from you today, this is the holding room, you need to move people, like, And I was like, "Okay." So I was doing that for a few days, and on the last day, I was in the room and, the whole creative team is talking, and Jay, the owner of the agency, was there, and he was like, You've done a good job this week."
Wow.
And I was like, "Thank you so much." And he was like, "We're gonna have you back." And so they kept calling me.
Wow.
And at the time, I was bartending at night, so I would work these auditions during the day,
Mhm.
and then I would go, work starting at 7 p.m.
Yeah, yeah.
And it became a very consistent thing, and I was loving it. And one day, very randomly, I was at an audition. I think it was actually for Legally Blonde on Broadway. And I'm there, and I get a call, and, it was Allison, who was the woman at the agency, and she was like, "Listen, what are you doing right now?" I was like, "I'm at a audition." She was like, "I need you to come have a meeting with everyone in the office from Binder, because we need to talk to you. You need to be here at this time, and you need to dress very nice." And I was like, "Okay." She's like, "So leave the audition, go home and change," and, so I didn't really know what was happening, so I
Yeah.
went home. I just left that audition.
Crazy.
I get there, I come into their office, and the entire team, and, that was very intimidating. I think at that point, I was maybe 23 or 24, and it was Jay, his associate Jack, his other associate Mark, the 2 assistants, the intern, and they're, all behind a table, and then there's a chair for me,
Oh my gosh.
and they were like, "Do you know why you're here?" And I was like, "I don't."
Oh my gosh.
Nervous. Um, and they're like, "We want you to come work with us." And I was like this, I was like, "Well, I thought I was working with you." And they're like, "No, full time."
Wow.
I was so floored, and they were like, "Listen, you will have to be here Monday through Friday. You can no longer audition. You have to make a very strong commitment to that. We have a lot of confidential," just like all I was like
Yeah.
it was a Friday, I remember that because they were like, "You start on Monday."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay." Um, and then I come to realize that the woman, Allison, who had been hiring me for the monitoring work, she was moving on to another opportunity, and I was gonna replace her as Jay's assistant.
Oh, wow.
And we could have a whole other podcast about all that, but, it was truly a life-changing
I
moment,
bet.
and the irony is that Monday, I walked in to the office, and I get a call, and it's a director who works a lot regionally, and he was like, "Hi, I'm so and so, you left your headshot, the other day at this call, we weren't able to see you. I'm casting, I don't remember what it was, for this tour, and we'd love for you to come in." And I was like, "I I can't. I ca I'm working in casting now." And he was like, "Oh, okay, well, good luck to you." Um, and I walked in the door, and truly that moment really changed my life.
And how many years were you there?
So, I ended up, working with them for 2 years, because during that time, it really came to me that I wanted to go to graduate school, and I was loving casting, but
Mhm.
I felt like I couldn't let go of this feeling that I really wanted to teach.
Yeah.
So that was why I left, and Jay actually, um, wrote one of my letters of recommendation for grad school,
How great.
um, which meant so much to me.
Yeah.
We had a very incredible relationship. We actually lived on the same block in New York when I worked for him, which was, crazy. Um, I'm so grateful for what he did for me. He passed away a little while ago,
Yeah.
and what he taught me about being a casting director, always stayed with me.
Do you mind sharing what some of those things were?
It really was about the mentorship. Jay
Mm.
loved actors, he loved dancers, and he wanted to see people succeed.
Hmm.
And, he could be very intimidating,
I
and he was an
remember.
interesting personality. I
Yeah.
mean, the end of that first week, he actually screamed at me so bad that I, like, left in tears, and, um, the 2 younger women who worked in the office at that point, they both called me, and they were like, "You have to come back on Monday. You have to come back. He will apologize. We're so sorry." Um, but he too, like, he had a very high expectation, but he cared
Mhm.
so deeply for the actors, and he held kinda pre-screen coachings before he would put them in front of, these big Broadway directors.
Oh, wow, that I did not know.
And he would bring them into the office, and he would pay for an accompanist to come in, and to me, that just showed how much he wanted to help them and what gratification he got from supporting them,
Yeah.
and he really went to a lot of lengths personally to help a lot of actors succeed, and that really stuck with me.
I had no idea that he did
Yeah,
that for people. That's really going above and beyond as
yeah,
far as I'm concerned. Now, you said you had this pull to always be a teacher, and sort of
yeah.
working there is what really sort of magnified that. Can you talk a little bit about what that pull was? Was it that were you seeing talent come in that you felt like wasn't ready and you wanted to help sculpt that talent, or was it just this impulse that you wanted to bring more theater makers into the industry?
At a very high level, like working on Broadway and really extreme commercialism, there is not always time to provide a lot of feedback for people.
Mm,
When you gather a whole team and you have people flying in from wherever and you have 3 days of callbacks,
yeah.
somebody immensely talented could walk in the room, do great, just not be quite right for the project. They never get to hear why.
Mhm.
I mean, occasionally, they get feedback from their agents through the casting directors and such, but a little bit of it was a little disheartening to me seeing so much talent not getting stuff, and I was
Mhm.
like, I want them I want people to understand what they could do before they show up to the audition,
Mm.
to help them, and even in undergrad, before I worked at Binder, friends used to say like, "Oh, can I sing my song for you? Can you give me some notes?" And I worked with a dear friend of mine one day, and then we went into musical theater class, and he did this incredible performance, and our instructor was like, What changed? What changed? What did you do?" And he was like, "Oh, I worked with Mitzi last night." And she gave me some coachings, and I remember that teacher looked at me and she goes, "You're gonna be an educator."
How amazing. But
I took that
did you already have that desire back then, or did that give you the spark?
I mean, I remember sitting through class. I always was very interested when everyone else was performing,
Yeah.
like, really paying attention and, occasionally, like, we would be able to give each other comments, like,
Mhm.
feedback and stuff,
Yeah.
and I enjoyed doing that, and so I think what I felt after the casting is, like, there could be so much joy in teaching because you really are, like, in a service position, you really are helping people, and it's
Yeah.
not that in casting you're not, but there is a bottom line in casting.
Yeah.
You have to get it done, you have to appease the producers, the directors, that team, and in the teaching, you really get to focus on the students.
Mm. And is that the most rewarding part of teaching for you?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel so grateful. I've made such really strong relationships with a lot of my students and a lot of my alumni from North Central College, where I teach now. Like, we keep in touch. They come see my shows,
Oh,
which is so amazing. And I try my best to come see all their work.
yeah.
Um, and now I'm seeing some of them come in and audition in my recent casting work. And it's incredible. I really feel when you offer somebody positive affirmation, when
Mhm.
you guide them through mentorship that never seeks to shame or bring them down,
Yeah.
how they develop and grow. And actually, tonight, I'm going to see a play at the college, that I'm not involved in, but it's with our department. And I just want to support the students.
Yeah.
They've worked really hard. We all know that. You get to the performances, it's so exciting.
Yeah.
So my time in the classroom, my time in the rehearsals with them is absolutely, like, my favorite part of teaching.
And what are some of the bigger challenges that you come across in teaching?
I think it's learning how to teach to everyone.
Hmm.
You have to
Yeah.
be very flexible as an educator. There's so many different types of learners. Again, it goes back to equity. Not everyone came with the same set of circumstances. And I think it is imperative for an educator to be prepared themselves to how to address each student individually,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to musical theater and you're working on singing and dancing and acting and professionalism. Um, and not expecting the students to be the same. I tell them
Yeah.
at the beginning of the semester, like, the goal is progress. So we're gonna mark where we're starting now, we're gonna
Mhm.
mark where we're at the halfway point, we're gonna mark where we are at the end, and you're never looking at each other to compare yourself.
Yeah.
You have to support everyone here because in supporting them, like you support you, we grow as a group, but we're not growing at different levels. And the other thing I prep them for is there will come a day in class, 2 different days. One is gonna be the day that it just doesn't line up for you, and it's gonna be difficult, and it won't be your best, and you'll be frustrated.
Yeah.
Everyone here will lift you up. And then there's gonna come a day where you really kill it, and everyone's going wild for you, and that day will be different for everyone. So whenever that day comes, we're gonna support you,
Mm.
but if that day is not your day, like, it will happen.
Yeah.
We have to celebrate all those wins. Um And the community, like, I think theater students in general, like, they wanna support each other, but it's on the instructor to set the tone of that environment.
Mm.
Um, that's one thing I learned from my own instructors in their own ways, and I just think leading with kindness will take you farther.
Agreed 1,000%. Yeah. There's too much negativity in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put out what you wanna get back. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
1,000%. So now you're back here in Chicago, you're acting again, you're casting again, you're
Yeah.
teaching. Out of all of those hats that you wear, do you have a favorite, or is it whichever one you're doing at that point in time?
I would say I feel deeply fortunate for where I have found myself in this moment now in Chicago.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, I really didn't know anyone. I knew one casting director that I had worked with in my time at Binder, actually, and they were so kind. 10 years had gone by, but we like got together and grabbed coffee when I first got here. Um, I have found the Chicago theater community to be a really incredible group of individuals,
Hmm.
um, and I think that's what I love the most.
Mhm.
The people I've gotten to work with, the people that I've gotten to do shows with, the actors I've gotten to know and work with through this casting. Um, I have a lot of aspirations, like, I wanna do it all. I love working. I'm a workaholic. Um, but I would say the other thing I'm actually really focused on recently, because I've been on, professional leave from the college this semester. I just earned tenure, and so I have this semester off,
Oh.
which has been amazing. And so I've been very intentional about making more time for my family.
Mhm.
I have 2 young kids, um, and I was offered a show actually during this break. It was a replacement to come in, and I was very honored by the person who contacted me because I love them, I have a lot of respect for them. And I looked at my calendar and I looked at the show and I contacted them and I was like, "You know what? I just can't take this much time away from my kids right now. I
Hmm.
just, I've already done 3 shows this year, like, which I say from a place of immense gratitude.
Mm.
But going back to my cousin Valerie and why she's an inspiration to me, she said to me, "Shows will come and go all the time.
Mhm.
Your children will not be the same age all the time." And so when I told my kids, like, "Mommy said no to that show." And they're like, "Oh, you're never gonna do like, shows again?"
Aw.
No, but, like, right now, like, I wanna be at your softball games, I wanna be at soccer, I wanna pick you up from school.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that the balance is so deeply important,
Mhm.
and it is that balance that I think makes me a better educator, makes me a better performer, makes me a better casting director, is to recognize that those roles are such a gift,
Yeah.
but you have to balance that with being a person.
Yeah. That's part of the reason why I put myself on a hiatus 12 years ago. My son was still
Yeah,
very young, and I was, working a couple jobs here after Jersey Boys closed, but
right?
looking at it all the time commitment of doing theater, I just thought, I wanna be able to watch my kid grow up And so that's why I took some time away and I worked corporate for 10 plus years and I was his soccer coach. And I was able to, I mean, he didn't do theater or anything like that until he was later in his high school career. But I was so grateful to spend the time with him that I did. And now that he's in college, I'm finding my way back in and having more time to do it, so I can completely relate with that. And it's nice to know that you have that flexibility with being tenured now at North
Yeah.
Central.
Also because my husband makes that possible too, when I'm doing shows and picking up the slack. And, I mean, you did that out of love for your son, and he will always remember that. And whether somebody's a parent or not, I just think remembering to take time for them in their personal lives to do things that offer them
Oh,
balance
yes.
and ground them. Because in our business, as you know, like, you can get into working, 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 working.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard, the work we do. It's so physically demanding and time
Mhm.
intensive that you have to remember to balance that. So I'm just been so grateful to be able to have had this time to step back and be with them.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned it was the university opportunity that brought you to Chicago. Was it your role at North Central, or was there one before that?
Yeah, no, it was, so we were living in California,
Yeah.
which is where both, me and my husband are from, and I was, teaching in San Diego, and I was performing. There's actually a really amazing theater community in San Diego, as well, but I didn't have a full-time tenure track position. I
Yeah.
was working as an adjunct and driving all over town, and so, I said to my husband, like, I really need this is really my dream, like, to land this tenure track position, and so I was applying, to a lot of positions, and I remember seeing this job for North Central College and reading the description, and I was like, "They're looking for me," and
Mm.
I had never heard of Naperville, which is where I was
Yeah.
um, so I applied, made it to the first round of Skype interviews.
Mhm.
This was before Zoom. Felt really positive about that, felt prepared. They invited me to campus for final interviews. Um, and this I like, believe in little signs like this, but as I was here visiting, doing my interview and they were touring me around the spaces, I walk into one of the theaters and, there's somebody, like, behind the lighting board, they were, like, prepping for something, and he has a San Francisco Giants hat on,
Uh-huh.
and I'm from San Francisco, and I was like, "This is very weird, like, we're in Naperville, like, what is." And so I was like, "Hi, I'm Mitzi, like, this is so random, but you're wearing a San Francisco Giants hat here?" Like,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Yeah, I'm from San Francisco." And we started chatting. Turns out we went to high school together.
Crazy.
And in that moment, I know people are gonna roll their eyes and be like, "Wow, she is really." But in that moment, I was like, "I'm gonna get this job. Like, this is a sign." Like, this is just too random.
Gut in there's nothing wrong with gut instincts. Absolutely not.
And, the college was amazing and the students were so sweet and, hearing about the department and the program, I was like, "Wow." And then learning about Naperville and greatest place to live, I was like, "This sounds incredible." So, when I got the job offer, I was over the moon. I mean, and it was daunting at the time. I had a almost 3-year-old and an 8-month-old.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so I was like, "All right, we're about to go on quite an adventure." I found out in November, and then we didn't end up moving, of course, until the summertime
Yeah.
prior to the start of the academic year. Um, and now we have been here. This summer will be 7 years.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's not for the faint of heart moving halfway across the country. That's exactly what we did with our son. He was a
Yes.
year and 10 months old when we moved here. Um, and
Not
we
for the
drove
faint
no,
of
and we drove here in a little Mini Cooper, believe it or not, from New Jersey because we had 2 cars. One was a big old Ford Taurus that my in-laws had gifted us, but it was old. We knew we could not drive that to Chicago, so we put that on a flatbed and shipped it, and we drove ourselves. And I just to my amazement, I still think, I can't believe we drove half across the country in a Mini Cooper with a year and 10-month-old in the back who had
right?
a raging fever when we rolled into Chicago. Our first stop was to a pediatrician to get medicine
Of
for him. It
of
was,
course,
yeah, because, nothing could be easy.
parenting.
What is the one most important piece of advice that you offer either your students or any other theater maker that might be starting their career out?
Um, I try to remind both myself and my students, two things. Number one, do not wait for someone to give you permission to be great.
Oh,
It is on you to know that you're worthy of greatness. During my college and how competitive it was, and at the time in those programs, they had the cut systems by your sophomore year, and like several students were excused. I felt so much pressure,
mm,
to be
yeah.
great, to not get cut, to graduate, to be able to move to New York. And while as an educator, I'm so honored, to be able to guide these students, I'm not the end all be all either.
Hmm,
I don't know everything. I'm not, you know, the only person that can guide them and teach them.
mhm,
And, sometimes as hard as you try, you may not always connect with every student. They may not always be able to understand like your philosophy.
mm,
So don't give away the power to other people to determine whether you're great or not.
mm,
And I would say number two, are you working as hard as you can?
mm,
Are you doing everything in your power to show up, to be ready, to be prepared? Um, it's so daunting in this business,
mhm,
and I don't want them to lose sight of the fact that showing up to an audition is incredible success. Showing up prepared,
mhm,
doing what they intend to do is the sign of success. And I share with my students all the time, especially as I've been performing more. I was like, "Hey, I went to a call today, didn't do my best. Super frustrated. I need to stop and look at like what I did, or hey, I went to this audition. I felt great. I didn't get a call back." So I share all of that with them,
That's amazing.
because I need them to know that even like 20 years in, I have stuff to learn. I have stuff to work on. I can still do my best and not get cast. And it's not because I'm not great.
Yeah,
It's because it wasn't, what they needed.
yeah. That is
So,
getting that real world feedback from your college professor that they're in the trenches doing what you wanna be doing. That's incredible.
me too.
I didn't experience that. I didn't go through a traditional university setting, but I can only imagine that it wakes you up a bit. Like, this person is not God. This person is one of my opportunities to do the thing and refine my craft, and they're in it with me. And how
Yes.
great to know that.
Yeah. And, just that all the professors are going to be different. And like, you have to be open to like their different styles. You may connect with one or two over another, but,
Yeah.
everyone has something to offer them. But to not lose sight of how important like they are. I don't want them to think that like they need my approval. It's like, no, you
Mm.
need your approval,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
you know?
huge. Now, in your 7 years that you've been here, do you have any favorite Chicago theater experiences of yours, either shows that you've been in or shows that you've seen as an audience member?
Um, I've been so grateful to get to do the shows I've gotten to do here, truly because of the people. You and I worked on Fiddler together,
Mhm,
and that was a really also life-altering moment for me
mhm,
here. Um, it was the first show I booked here. I really wanted to work at Drury Lane. I really wanted to work with Elizabeth. That show is very, very, very important to me.
mhm.
I came out of it with incredible friends,
It was a good group.
who it was an amazing group.
Yeah.
Um, I got to understudy, Janet Brooks, who's, like, so incredible and hysterical, and Susan Hofflander, and, like, just learn from all these people. And then it was so funny to turn around next and do a show where, like, I was the older I was the older actor, and I worked with an amazing group of young people in Cinderella, and, just a gift, then doing Fiddler again this summer
Mhm,
as my dream role of playing Golda. I still actually haven't come down from the high of it. It was such a short run, but it was so incredible. Another phenomenal group of people,
mhm.
some who I did it with at Drury Lane,
Yes.
um the Tevye of my dreams, we're such good friends now, and, Um, I would say, I've gotten to see so many shows here as well.
Mhm.
Um, Chicago produces such amazing work.
Mhm.
Storefront work, small theater work, non-equity work, big, huge, um, commercial productions, and I would say what I'm just most excited about is, like, the proximity to seeing great theater,
Yes.
you know? I try to remind my students, like, things are accessible, you can take trains, you can get student tickets, you can get, last minute stuff, Rush, all of that, like, we are so saturated in this area.
Yeah.
Even in the suburbs, right? There's, like, amazing theater happening,
Yeah.
so, um and also doing beautiful working with Jane Lanier, like, I feel so fulfilled from those shows,
Yeah.
and I would say, I mean, this is, like, such a biased answer, but really one of my favorite moments was a show, I did at the college. Um, I have loved all of them, so if my students are listening to this, like, I don't have a favorite. It's just that this was such a unique, experience, but we did a brand new show. It had had an off-Broadway run right before COVID called Renaissance by
Okay.
Carmel Dean and Dick Scanlon, and it's based on all the poetry of Edna St. Vincent Millay, who was the first woman to win a Pulitzer Prize for poetry.
Okay.
And I had met Carmel when I was in grad school. She came and she did an unbelievable workshop, and so when I was choosing shows to direct, I really wanted to do a show with a female composer.
Okay.
So I'm searching stuff. I came across this show. I had an email from her, again, over 10 years ago. I responded and I was like, "Hello, 10 years later, I'm a, professor here. I wanna license your show. I met you." She wrote back immediately, and she was like, "This is so exciting. You're the very first production after our off-Broadway run. Dick and I would love to Zoom with your students, and, like, this is just so exciting."
Wow.
I was we had a live group of musicians, and for the students, they had never heard the show before. They'd never heard of any of this, the music was so complex.
Yeah.
The way that they worked together to support each other and, like, figure out and discover this work, it was, like, quirky and different,
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes, like, you gotta get them to be open-minded
Yeah.
and, um just everyone who worked on the show, everyone who helped support the show, make the show happen, the audience members, the poetry professor that came and helped. It was such an incredible, combination, the professional designers who worked on that show, like, everything just came together so seamlessly,
Hmm.
and I think what was just so amazing to me is, like, this moment of having a workshop with Carmel when I was in grad school. And that she would be so generous. I mean, she is working as a music director in New York and writing stuff all the time. The fact that she took the time,
Yeah.
not only to email back, but to Zoom with the students to talk about the development of the show,
How
I was
great.
like, as a student, I would have, like, I don't know, that just would have been so special. So I would say, like, yes, it's a North Central show or, like, plug for my department, but it really stuck with me,
I can
that show. You don't know Renaissance. Um,
I'm gonna look it up because I didn't know about it till just this moment.
yeah. Yeah, it's an
Renaissance.
incredible show.
Where can our listeners find you online?
So you can find me online, Mitzi Smith MFA.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Mitzi Smith MFA. I love, meeting people through social media and networking that way. And I really want to say thank you. When you and I worked together on Fiddler, we had such a great opportunity to connect both about Jersey Boys, knowing so many people in common and just what it's like to come to Chicago, not being from here.
Yeah.
And so thank you, for both the friendship
Hmm.
and, I'm so happy to see you succeeding in so many ways here,
Aw.
and getting the opportunity for yourself now and to be invited. I've watched so many of these episodes, um, and I think I speak for both of us when I say to, like, be considered among Chicago theater community, like, is what we wanted and worked for,
Hmm.
like, when you're not from here, so,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
from one conversation in the ballroom of Drury Lane to
yeah.
here.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate hearing that very much coming from somebody of your background and
Well,
influence and all of your success in New York and now here. We're both doing it. So I'm proud of the both of us. Yeah, for sure. And thanks for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
thank you.
Thanks for joining us at the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Chicago Theater Makers Podcast is a production of Spirit Art LLC, and our podcast theme music is by Paul Langford. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please drop us a note at our website, ChiTheaterMakersPodcast.com. That's ChiTheater, makers with an S, podcast.com. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us as much as we enjoyed spending it with you, and we'll see you on the board soon.